Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Corsair's Delight, written by Clad. The Valturi had come to our world and left it in ruin. Our peaceful world burned into cinders to drive us away from it. We tried again and again to get them to leave us alone, but all of our attempts had failed. Even our mighty ships had been unable to stop the war machine of the Valturi, nor slow their slave fleets. And that's what this was, a slave collection campaign, taking an entire species and breaking their will, stripping our culture, our identity, and then sending us off to the highest bidder. It had happened to countless species before us, those too weak to properly defend themselves. It certainly did not help our odds that the Valturi would take the technology of those they conquered and improve upon their designs, incorporating it all into their own tech. It only made them stronger and stronger, while we grew weaker and more stagnant. Only a few species had ever managed to repel these savages. Some had not even been targeted in the first place. Their power unmatched, and so fighting them would lead only to defeat. I was captain of a hastily put-together flotilla. A flotilla comprised of colony ships and civilian vessels of all shapes, models, and sizes. Around us was an escort fleet, the last of our battered and broken navy. This is how it all played out before. They would burn our worlds, force us to gather all our populace in one fleet, and then strike, snatching us up all in one fell swoop. Some species had avoided this outcome, like humanity. Humanity. They were our only hope at this time. They had faced the wrath of the Valturi and emerged victorious, even after losing 20 of their worlds. So incensed by the atrocities the Valturi had inflicted upon them, they would surely have lost every last world they came across in retaliation, and it was only the Galactic Council's warning that they would be expelled from the Federation if they did so that got them to settle for reparations and the return of any enslaved humans. Of course, the Council forgot that humans tend to hold grudges. Since they couldn't conquer the Valturi, they did the next best thing. They made their lives a living hell in the form of constant pirate raids, or, as the humans called it, privateering. Paid pirates in service to the estate, striking only when the state wished. And human pirates are a terror to behold. Not every human pirate wanted to leash themselves to the government they chafed under, of course, so running into them was always a gamble. You never really knew what kind of human pirates you were encountering. Which was why I was currently hoping that even though we had just entered pirate-controlled territory, we would not meet any of them at all. It would be better to be chased into the welcome arms of the human navy than run afoul of pirates. I watched as the approaching fleet of Valturi warships grew ever closer on my sensor screens, chewing my bottom lip as it passed into dangerous waters, so to speak. I did not know it at the time, but we were already being watched. Commodore Victoria Annabel Juliet Higgins, or rather just Higgins, sat upon an ornate throne on the bridge of her pride and joy, Corsair's Delight, and looked over the readings she was being shown. It was quite the fleet that had reached their borders, but it was mostly civilian ships. Lots and lots of civilian ships. Too many, actually. Her one organic eye narrowed as she looked over the readings. A few military ships were limping along, barely holding themselves together, and would be easily dealt with once she gave the order to strike. But something didn't sit right with her. No civilian fleet, even with military escort, would have willingly entered this regional space. Not unless they were desperate, which meant something terrible was following them to drive them into a place like this, which also meant she needed to know more. "Mr. Powell, I want a detailed scan of one of those ships. I wish to know who they belong to." Her voice was clear as day as it rolled across the bridge, and the scruffy-looking man at the scanners nodded. Aye, Commodore," he said, voice scratchy and quite fitting for his appearance. There was silence for a time. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the engines or the soft beeping of consoles. "Ships identified. Sending it your way, ma'am." "Thank you, Mr. Powell," she said, tilting her gaze downwards at the screens as the requested information was delivered. The brow over her cybernetic implant rose considerably before her brow furrowed as she connected the name of the species with recent happenings. Her target was the Soulier merchant ship, the Soulier being a strange hybrid of beaver and otter. Not really, of course, but that is what they most closely resembled to humanity. A peaceful sort, always on good terms with humanity as well, seeing as just about every human being in existence found them awfully cute. It didn't help that they were half the average height of a human either. But what made her brow furrow was just what was happening to them. It was no secret that the Volturi were on the move again, but their targets were unknown at this time. They were always careful to block any and all communications out of an area while they were attacking, so no calls for help were ever received. One day, your friends amongst the stars simply ceased talking and existing in their original form. And they would surely be interested in keeping the Sudia silent, as they had many, many mutual defense treaties with the Republic that would see humanity entering into a war with the Volturi once more. Something those savages most certainly wished to avoid. But she couldn't base her next move off a mere assumption. She needed proof, even as she felt righteous anger started to rise in her gut. A clawed metal finger tapped lightly on the arm of her throne, and she glanced up at the black screen full of the stars on the wall opposite her. "Mr. Powell, please run a detailed scan of the battle damage. Give me a name." "Aye, aye," he said, hunching over yet again. It didn't take long for him to get an answer, and it caused a hint of anger to enter his voice. "Volturi weapon signatures confirmed." Well, that settled it. She felt her cheeks flush with rage, even as she kept her outward appearance neutral. But that didn't stop the grin of malicious glee from spreading over her lips. Standing slowly, she braced herself upon the cane that was nearly as ornate as her throne. Her robotic hand smoothed out her coat, and she rapped the end of her cane against the deck, drawing the attention of the entire bridge. "Then let it be known, we sail into battle with our most despised foe. Disseminate these orders to the battle group, protect the civilian fleet at all costs, destroy the Volturi, and plunder their ill-gotten wealth. Show no quarter." Her voice boomed, and she could see her crew was growing all the more excited with every word. "Spool up the FTL, all hands to battle stations, jump on my mark, for glory, and plunder." Her voice rattled the room, making the deck vibrate beneath their feet. But it was quickly drowned out by the deafening cheer that arose from every soul aboard her ship and those under her command. As one, they turned and assumed battle formation, before they leapt into the stars and towards the most glorious battle indeed. "Captain, Kiltree's Fury just went down," my census officer reported, sending another wave of hopelessness through us. That was the 5th military escort we'd just lost since the Volturi subjugation force had arrived. We only had 3 more escorts left, and already the enemy was taking shots at the engines of the civilian ships. We were doomed. There was no hope left, and all I could wish for was a kinder fate for my family than most would get. I was very nearly about to order a surrender when the same officer spoke up. "New contacts, dead ahead, humans, sir." He sounded excited, hope returning to his voice even as it swelled within my own breast. I stood, my broad flat tail thumping the deck, as it typically did when I was about to give an order. "Hail them immediately," I practically yelled, my voice cracking in a way I just knew those humans would adore. "We can't. The Volturi are still jamming our communications and—" He paused, watching as the jamming cleared up, thanks to counter-jamming from the human ship. "Scratch that. Comms are clear, and we're being hailed already." I felt my tail again, and that was a cue to put the human on the screen. I expected the well-maintained and pressed uniform of a human naval officer. Instead, I came face to face with what was clearly a pirate, an intimidating one at that. The woman's face was damn near perfectly symmetrical, were it not for the large, bulky augmentation over where her left eye should have been. The lens of the cyber eye glowing a dull red. She wore her mostly black but streaked through with red hair in a very long but also high ponytail, and her right arm was replaced with a wicked-looking black cybernetic. The clawed fingers were done in gold, and it looked like it could easily peel off the armor of a Volturi berserker. What was perhaps most striking was her garb. She wore a long coat, colored mostly black, though, with golden accents. A series of blood-red slashes strewed over her chest. Her presumably still organic left hand was covered by a black glove and a clutched cane, upon which she leaned. All in all, she looked professional, even for a pirate. "I'm Commodore Victoria Higgins of the Corsair's Delight. It appears that you are in dire need of assistance. We are here to provide said assistance," she said, and I blinked. Pirates do not render aid, and privateers wouldn't either, unless ordered to. So clearly they would be extracting some sort of price from us later, once fighting was over. It was better than slavery, though. I was certain that we could pay any price when the bill was due. "I'm Captain Uven Urida of the Sudia merchant vessel Peruk. We are indeed in need of dire assistance. Anything you can provide us will be deeply appreciated. The Volturi had destroyed our homeworld. We're all that's left of our species. Please, help us," I pled, and I expected some sense of satisfaction from the human. Instead, All I see from her is a cold anger. An anger that was not directed at me. Help is on the way. Push your engines as much as you can to... Do not engage the ships. Her voice was distorted as the Valtori switched up their jamming. And soon the link was broken. But that didn't matter. Our cries for help had been heard, and help was on the way. I watched as the Corsair's delight went from an unknown designation in our senses to that of a friendly. Then another appeared beside it. Then another, and another. Till there were at least 50 pirate vessels moving in perfect formation around their flagship. I did not feel quite as hopeless now that they were here, but the battle would be hard fought indeed. The jamming was cut through yet again, all of our ships given a single order: run. We did just that, pushing our engines as hard as they could, disengaging safety limiters and risking overload just to obey that order. We watched as the far larger Valtori fleet closed the distance, and then we got front row seats to the chaos that unfolded. It looked at first like a completely disorganized mess. Our ships detected the humans running quick yet highly detailed scans of the enemy ships, life sign scans at that, as though hunting for our missing people. Some unseen hand linked us into their tactical net, and in doing so provided us with minimal comms. We could only receive, not broadcast. Severe life signs detected on 20 enemy ships. Boarding crews prepare for combat. Man the harpoons and stand by for intra-system FTL jumps. This is Poseidon's scorn. Targets acquired and locked in. Red Sea and Tainted Horror form up on us. Load the broadsides. All ahead full. Sanguine King launching all fighters and boarding craft. Main batteries online, preparing for salvo fire. Uncultured swine and support group preparing for FTL ramming maneuvers. All hands, brace, brace, brace. And finally, there was a voice I'd been waiting for, holding my breath without realizing it. I dreaded to think of the chaos these humans would sow, but they were outnumbered by a full 150 ships, many of which were far larger than anything the pirate vessels had at their disposal. This is the Commodore, battleships. Show them no quarter. Engage at will, for glory and plunder. And just like that, ship contacts on sensors flipped out of existence, only to reappear within the enemy formations. It was instant chaos, and I was glad our few remaining military escorts had launched some drones to observe these brave humans. What we saw wasn't bravery, but a whirlwind of rage-fueled insanity. 3 human destroyer-sized ships dropped out of FTL, screaming straight for a Valtori battleship. Their armored prows taking hit after hit from the Valtori main guns and shrugging them off like it was nothing, before plowing into the much larger ship in perfect unison. Metal twisted and shattered, the savage hull of the battleships buckling under the combined strain of not 1 but 3 ships ramming it at the same time. Such was the force of the impact that the 3 ships pushed it screaming into another, their broadside weaponry pounding at anything they could easily target just to aid insult to injury. From another group of human ships swarmed rickety-looking snub-nosed fighter craft, descending upon the far more put-together fighter craft of the Valtori, tearing them to shreds with crude kinetic and laser weaponry. Cluster missiles streaked from the wings and split apart, taking down entire squadrons in a single shot. And the rest of them, the rest was sailing in circles around their targets, pounding away with their broadsides, while others separated the mighty Valtori capital ships from their support craft, destroying them through the use of hunting packs. We watched as several human ships were gutted, as they were civilian craft that had been refitted to serve as gunboats. We watched in awe as ships would disable certain craft by destroying their propulsion and taking out their weapons, only to fire thick cable harpoons into the hull, drawing them in for hard docking. We couldn't see what happened next with those ships, but we could hear the sounds of gunfire and the screeching of the reptilian Valtoris as their ships were boarded. Human pirates, most of which were ex-military, sweeping through in kill teams. Then came a most glorious message. Slave pens located, beginning extraction. All other teams prepared to scuttle the ships. Leave nothing behind. The voice was cool and collected, but even I could hear the disgust for these savages in their voice. At least our people were being rescued. That was all that mattered. The battle, if you could even call it that, lasted for an hour. In that time, of the 50 pirate vessels that came to our aid, 16 were lost. As for the Valtori, they lost well over 112 ships, fleeing as the last of their slaves were reclaimed. When it was over, any pirate vessels not bearing our people picked over the broken hulks, executing any survivors with extreme prejudice. It was cruel and against the law, but they were pirates, and pirates simply don't care about the law. Still, I felt no sympathy as I watched them depressurize escape pods. No sympathy at all. With our people returned, we were escorted by those that remained to the nearest human-controlled station, one with a heavy military presence. Before the human navy could respond to the pirates, our saviors had all jumped away, leaving us in the care of the military. Naturally, we were well taken care of, but us captains that had survived the exodus were debriefed about the nature of our saviors. They didn't reveal much, not even after everything we told them. But as the last officer stood and made to leave, I stopped them with an earnest question. "Who exactly rescued us? Are they privateers?" I asked, and the man shook their head slowly. No, they are not. They're proper pirates. You're lucky you weren't targeted after the battle," he said, and left me to stew with that little bit of information. Weeks later, I would oversee the recolonization of my species on several uninhabited planets within human territory. Planets and systems they could afford to lose were now ours. It was a generous gift indeed, though we would be sure to repay them for their kindness they had shown when we could. And I've decided, though they were pirates, we shall never forget the actions of the Corsair's Delight and her captain. The officer that had interviewed Captain Uven stepped into his quarters aboard the battleship Kane, settling into a comfortable chair and pulling out a small tablet. With a deep and reluctant sigh, he typed in a password and opened up a secure channel. The face that appeared on the screen was one he knew well. A single green eye, accompanied by a red cybernetic eye, peered at him across the light years. Well, if it isn't the esteemed captain himself, to what do I owe such a pleasure?" Victoria said, adding a hint of disgust at the mention of his rank. "Hello to you, Victoria. Still a raging bitch, I see." His tone was deeply exasperated. "And you're still a government sellout, so nothing's changed, I guess." "Nope, nothing has. Though clearly you have a soft spot in your heart for tiny otter people." He grinned, and she squinted at him. "So what if I do? It was the Volturi. You know I couldn't sit back and let them be taken. Not after," she paused. And he didn't need any context. He knew exactly what she was talking about. I knew you couldn't. They're doing just fine, by the way. We're going to set them up with some worlds we aren't using. Make sure they're well cared for." "Good. That is good to hear. At least you're useful for something," she said, the tone of disgust fading immediately, now that she sounded tired. "And what about those beasts? Are you going to do anything about them?" "As far as I know, we will. The Surdia have invoked practically all of our mutual defense treaties. Not that they really needed to. I doubt even the Galactic Council will be able to hold us back this time," he said, and Victoria nodded, pleased by his answer. "Excellent. Then perhaps we'll get to see if that shiny ship of yours lives up to the name. See you in the battlefield." "Victoria, wait!" But he was a bit too slow. The connection cut, and so he tossed the tablet onto his cot, groaning and staring up at the ceiling. "Stay safe, sister." End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.